Campaign report now on BBC One with Michael Burke.
Labour's claimed that the majority of Tory election candidates oppose John Major's policy on Europe. The Conservatives say Labour candidates are robots. A faltering Pope prays for peace in snowbound Sarajevo. And a goal at the last gasp keeps Chesterfield's dream of Wembley alive. Good evening. Labour's published a survey of Conservative candidates' election addresses that they say shows a clear majority of them are opposed to the government's wait-and-see line on the single currency. The Defence Secretary, Michael Portillo, said it was perfectly reasonable for the candidates to have different views, and Labour's candidates were, as he put it, automata. Our political editor, Robin Oakley, reports.
Having given the nation an extra-long election campaign, John Major took time off his duties today to join spectators at the London Marathon. His political footsteps are still dogged by Tory candidates who refuse to accept the Cabinet's policy of waiting for later negotiations before deciding on a single European currency, and who are opposing it outright. But Mr. Major denied that would confuse the voters.
There's one clear, distinct divide between the two main parties, or between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. They're essentially federalists. They will go down the route towards a centralist Europe. We will not.
Labour produced a survey of 100 Conservative candidates' election addresses, in which over half declared themselves against a single currency. Divided, dogmatic and disloyal, they said. But wasn't it better for people to spell out their full views to the electors?
The problem for the Conservative Party is that they cannot claim to be a national party with an agreed collective line if they are fielding in this election 300 independent candidates and 300 people standing on the Conservative platform.
With both Labour and the Tories sitting on the fence, only the Liberal Democrats are campaigning in favour of Britain entering a single currency, if entry conditions are met.
If it does happen, and France and Germany and several other European countries are in it, and we are not, where does that leave all these exporters? 60% of our trade's now tied up with the rest of the European Union. We're going to be high and dry. It would be like Manhattan trying to run a separate dollar from the rest of the United States.
Today, the Referendum Party, which is demanding a referendum not just on a single currency, but on Britain's whole future relationship with Europe, drew several thousand supporters to hear its leader, financier Sir James Goldsmith, accuse the other parties of failing to defend Britain's sovereignty.
Under such circumstances, the only valid policy is to say no. We know by now that the Eurocrats and the bureaucrats will find a way around anything so as to achieve their single purpose, a federal European superstate. The juggernaut cannot be tinkered with. It must be stopped in its tracks and reversed.
With the election passing its halfway point, Labour's leaders trying to change the nature of the campaign. Labour strategists believe the country's being turned off by negative tit-for-tat campaigning. So today in Milton Keynes, they unveiled a new set of posters designed to accentuate the positive.
So I don't care how negative they're going to be, how much they're going to shout and bawl and scream at us, how many personal attacks are going to come on me and all the rest of the Labour Party. But throughout this campaign, I say this to you and I say it to the British people, we are offering a different vision of our country's future.
The Liberal Democrats leader said Labour and Tories had £20 million to throw at each other.
If that is spent funding a firestorm of negative campaigning against each other, then what will be burnt up in the process is trust in the political system as a whole.
The Tories, however, believe that by harrying on policy detail, they've brought wobbles and raised doubts about the Labour leader. And they were scornful of Mr. Blair's new tactics.
He's relaunching his campaign for the third time. He launched it before the manifesto. He relaunched it at the manifesto. We've had a number of mini relaunches since. And I think it's the best possible justification for the truth of the newspaper stories today that their campaign is in big trouble and that he personally is starting to crack up.
The Tories intend to go on playing both man and ball, risking a dent in Mr. Major's image. Labour now aim to keep Mr Blair clear of the dogfight. But few believe an election based on trust can be entirely positive. Robin Oakley, BBC News, Westminster.
Other news, Pope John Paul has left Sarajevo after a 2-day visit there. Both main parties accusing the other of being split over the single currency. Well, joining me now is the BBC's political editor, Robin Oakley. Labour's research, you were telling us earlier, was showing that the voters, well, they were being told by the voters that they didn't like this personal negative stuff. But can any of the parties actually stop themselves?
I don't think we'll ever get completely away from it, Mike, because we have a robust election tradition in this country. You always have a certain amount of John says Tony is woolly and Tony says John is feeble and Paddy says they're both a bit of a shower. So we'll always have some of that. There's no doubt the Tories have been going hard after Mr Blair personally, but then so has Labour been harping on about Mr Major's weak leadership on single currency and on sleaze. So although they may say that the voters don't like negative campaigning, they've both got a suspicion that negative campaigning actually works. And if it does result in a lot more name-calling and it turns people off politics, the politicians aren't going to take the blame. They'll put the blame on you and me at the end of the day.
What, if any, differences, then, are we likely to see tomorrow?
Well, I think Tony Blair will live up to his promise to go positive tomorrow, because education has been his big priority. He's making his biggest speech on education tomorrow. He'll be talking about getting away from talking about structures, getting onto standards in schools, general teaching council, sending in hit squads to bad schools, that kind of thing. The interesting thing will be whether the Tories respond purely by trying to pick at the detail of Labour's plans and go on being attacking in that sense, or whether they start in the next week responding by going for some of their positive policies on things like pensions and care for the elderly.
Robin, thanks very much indeed. And that's the news tonight. On Panorama at 8:30 tomorrow evening, David Dimbleby will interview the leader of the Scottish National Party, Alex Salmond, and Plaid Cymru's leader, Dafydd Wigley. From Helen and me, though, good night.